Hi, welcome. We'll just give a few minutes for all the participants to complete the registration process. I think they're just sort of trickling in as we speak. So we'll just give them some time to kind of register and come on board, and then we can start. Okay, I think we can get started. Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our session, which we have very imaginatively titled Judicial Decisions Part 1 and Part 2. It's basically a two-part series that we are hosting, which will cover important judicial decisions with respect to the POSH law. The idea being to give you all a flavor of how the judiciary has been interpreting the POSH law, high courts, different high courts, or even the appellate authorities, etc., so that you have an understanding of how the law is being interpreted. Each we are today's part 1, and we will cover three cases today. Each part will have 3 cases each. So you will find in the next sort of part on judicial decisions, the second episode, if you will, which will be hosted next month. You will find that will have 3 more cases as well. So that's really the objective of how we are sort of conducting this 2-part series. We call it the 2-part info series. So the idea is for all of you to have a good understanding of the judicial mind in terms of how it's working with respect to the POSH law. And some of the cases may actually turn out to be quite surprising in the sense of how the courts have interpreted the law. It may not always be the way we conventionally understand the courts to interpret the law. So keep an eye out. We'll bring these info webinars to you, primarily with the objective of ensuring that all of your understanding with respect to this very fairly new, yet I would say somewhat nuanced law is being brought to you as cases are coming out. We'll start with with Ruchika Singh Chhabra versus Air France India and others. It's a 2018 case, popularly known as the Air France case. And actually, this case is it's a case which has often been quoted in articles, in blog posts, in other cases as well. As it's become some sort of a landmark case, the Air France case, right? So I'd like to walk you through what was really what were the facts in this case and what was really ultimately decided by the High Court in this particular case. So here in the Air France case, the complainant alleged that she had been subjected to sexual harassment by the managing director of Air France India, right? Her plea was that she had been harassed on multiple occasions and had cited several incidents to support her complaint in the complaint that she had filed. The management, the company, actually tried to stop the complainant from filing a complaint, and in the process, they ultimately compelled her to resign as well. And the way the entire sequence of events transpired in this case is somewhat sad and gruesome, in the sense that 3 or 4 male employees of Air France physically molested and forced the complainant to actually sign a resignation letter, right? So She was literally forced out of the organization. She then filed a complaint with the internal committee of Air France. The internal committee, which did not have an external member, the external panelist as required by law, appointed a labor law counsel who was actually already on the panel of Air France, meaning the labor law counsel was actually drawing remuneration and had a sort of vested interest, so to speak, in supporting Air France or the management of Air France, because they were already drawing some form of remuneration from the organization. This labor law counsel or the external member has no experience in women's welfare or matters of sexual harassment, which is key from the perspective of how the POSH law describes the expertise that one should have. And thereby, the court held that it had kind of violated the Vishaka guidelines and the POSH law. The complainant challenged the constitution of the IC before the Delhi High Court, right? So this, the complainant actually brought forth before the Delhi High Court the fact that the constitution of the IC, more particularly the external member, the constitution of the IC, because was invalid or ultra vires the law, because the external member was not qualified as per the POSH law. So these are sort of the facts very, very broadly. So what did the court hold? What did the Delhi High Court hold? The Delhi High Court held, a division bench of the Delhi High Court held that the entire thrust of the Complaints Committee's procedure and its underlying premise is that the complainant employees are assured objectivity and neutrality in the inquiry, insulated from the possible intrusions of the employer or whoever is management in that organization. So simply put, the objective of the law, as we all understand it and as outlined by the division bench of the Delhi High Court, was very simply that there had to be absolute neutrality with respect to the internal committee, because the complainant, whoever the complainant was, or an aggrieved woman, or even employees, they should be assured that no matter what, the internal committee, even if majority of the committee members are members of the organization or employees, at least the external member will sort of bring about lack of bias or impartiality to the entire proceedings. That's the way the law also sees it, and that's how the sort of division bench of the Delhi High Court also saw it. To achieve that end, the requirement under law concerning the qualification of the independent member on the internal committee is an indispensable necessity for meting out justice under the POSH Act. So the sort of Delhi High Court felt that it was absolutely critical that the external members' sort of lack of bias and independence had to be assured. So this independence would have been compromised if the external member was also drawing other remuneration from the organization. So if they were on, if they were on a panel, they were handling other cases, they had then a vested interest in ensuring that organization continued the relationship with that individual, right? So that was the other aspect that was brought out by the division bench of the High Court, and therefore the High Court struck down the IC constituted by Air France and directed for the IC to be reconstituted, and again hear the matter afresh. So as it's clear that ICs cannot be constituted, in as per the whims and fancies of the management or of the managing director or what have you. It has to be constituted in accordance with the guidelines laid down as per the POSH law 2013. And it's not just one often thinks, in this case, of course, it dealt with the members of the external member, but very often a court could very well look into whether the internal members or members of the internal committee who are employee members, do they meet the qualifications as well. So one has to be very careful when appointing members of the internal committee, particularly the external member, because that's the one member who both the law and even the judiciary now believe that their appointment is critical, and that neutrality and lack of bias is very, very important. So what are the key takeaways for all of us? And for those who are practitioners of POSH law, it's very, very important that we understand what are the key takeaways from this particular case, because this is the one case that constantly comes up whenever anybody talks about the POSH law. And it must be remembered that this case had many, many things that were discussed. We're not going into all of that. For example, the sort of respondent also challenged the jurisdiction of the Delhi High Court on a technical ground. And so all of those we are not going into. We're focusing really the aspects that relate to the POSH law as well. So this case highlighted the importance of evaluating each individual's eligibility to be appointed as an IC member, and the caution that employees are required to exercise prior to appointing them. So if you are advising the management of your organization on appointing IC members, both internal and external, be very, very careful and ensure that you're following the letter and spirit of the law to ensure that no fingers can be raised against the organization, because a case like this can be extremely embarrassing for a company to be, and Air France is a multinational. It's a very well respected organization and a brand. So it is also embarrassing for the organization globally that in one of the countries that it operates in, strictures were passed against the organization. Now, we have not discussed this Supreme Court case in detail, but in a recent case, Punjab and Sindh Bank and others versus Mr. Durgesh Kanwar, which is a 2020 case, the Supreme Court reiterated the stand taken by the Delhi High Court in the Air France case and held that external member appointed in an IC cannot belong to the panel of lawyers of the company, representing the company in other matters. Therefore, conflict of interest must be completely ruled out in that sense. So if you are an external member providing support to a particular internal committee, then the only remuneration you can and should be drawing from that organization is with respect to being a member of the IC. And that's it, nothing else. Because anything else is likely to put you in a position of conflict, right? So key takeaway, there should be no conflict of interest for IC members, especially external members, right? And the other takeaway, which is that the person should have expertise in this area. So the court clearly held that the labor law practitioner who was the external member on the IC of Air France had actually, while he was a labor lawyer, he actually had no sort of expertise in the POSH law or in handling cases of, handling cases of sexual harassment or in this space or in this area. That's an important factor. When you're appointing your external member, please ensure that your external member has the necessary qualifications. Are they already actively working in this area? Do they have expertise in this area? Are they sitting on other internal committees? That's very important that your external member is, as far as possible, sitting on other committees, so that that's one of the ways in which they can acquire expertise in this particular area, right? So this is the sort of Ruchika Singh Chhabra versus Air France India case. Very important case. For those of you who'd like to kind of dive deeper into it, please feel free to pull out this case off the web. It should be able to find it easily, and it makes for good reading actually. It's not a very lengthy judgment, but it is something that has enough takeaways for those of you who are active in this area, right? All right. Now we move to another interesting case, which is Global Health Private Limited and others versus Local Complaints Committee District and others. Now, this name might not ring a bell for most of you, but this is the name of the company that goes by the brand Medanta, right? So Medanta is a very, very well-known name. However, the legal name of the organization is Global Health Private Limited. We'll just refer to it as Medanta for easy reference. So the facts of this case are as follows. The complainant was a female senior marketing manager in Medanta. who alleged that her immediate superior officer, who was basically the medical superintendent, who's pretty much the all-in-all in a hospital, used to constantly interfere with her work and had created an intimidating and hostile work environment at the workplace. The complainant's repeated requests, constant complaints for protection and support sought from the superior authorities, including the managing director of the hospital, were disregarded. So she had essentially taken this up with other superiors within the organization, right up to the managing director of Medanta, who is a very well-known doctor by the name of Dr. Naresh Trehan, very well reputed. So she had taken up this matter even with him, but unfortunately got no response. Thereafter, the complainant was singled out and subjected to a hostile work environment. In this particular case, she was humiliated in front of her team, those who reported into her. The superintendent decided to directly sort of overrule her, bypass her, work directly with her team, and essentially did everything possible to make her completely redundant at the workplace, right? After she filed a complaint, her services were even terminated. So that's the extent to which the organization went in order to create an extremely hostile work environment for the complainant. Of course, doing all of this is not a best practice at all. Far from it. It's a terrible practice to do. And ultimately, of course, the organization paid the price for it. So the complainant filed a complaint with the local committee of that area, since Medanta did not have an IC, which is, again, we're talking about a 2019 case, not too long ago, 6 years after the law was passed. But even at that point of time, 6 years later, Medanta still did not have an internal committee, which is not just required by the POSH law, it's mandated by the POSH law, right? So 6 years post the law being passed, the POSH law being passed, Medanta still did not have an internal committee, and therefore the complainant had to go and file a complaint with the local committee. So the local committee, or the LC, conducted an inquiry and passed an order confirming that sexual harassment of the complainant did indeed take place, and passed strictures against the hospital for violating the Vishaka guidelines by not constituting the IC. So this case is actually a very, if you're a well-known organization, it's a major embarrassment, because such a well-known organization and a hospital that a hospital into which people entrust their lives with or their health with, did not deem it fit or appropriate to actually follow the POSH law in letter and spirit. And not only did they disregard the requirement of the law to set up an IC, they also made it extremely hostile for a woman who was being sexually harassed at the hospital, and ultimately sacked her as well. So it was not enough that she was sexually harassed. Ultimately, they also fired her, leading to a situation where she filed a complaint thereafter with the local committee. But these are the broad facts of the case. Again, like with the previous case, the Air France case, I would urge you all to actually pull out the PDF of this particular PDF of this case. Go through it in more detail. There's a lot more detail in the actual sort of case in the order that was passed by the High Court. What I'm giving you is really a flavor of what was decided. So the Madhya Pradesh High Court, the Indore bench, actually spent some time. Its order, it actually condemned the attitude of the managing director for not having taken into account the seriousness and sensitivity of the situation, and for the harassment that the complainant had been subjected to. So the fact that the complainant had also involved written and complained to the managing director, seeking his involvement because she was so traumatized and unable to perform her duties in the workplace, the managing director should have at a minimum gotten legal advice and possibly constitute an internal committee to hear the case. Nevertheless, that did not happen, and that led to a situation where the matter ultimately ended up before the High Court, and the High Court in no uncertain terms condemned the behavior of the managing director. So here's the lesson here. If you are advising the management or managing director of the organization, please ensure that they understand the importance and seriousness of complying with the POSH law in letter and in spirit, because otherwise you could find yourself at the receiving end of strictures like the one that the MD of Medanta Hospital found himself in. So the court came down. This is the second and more interesting part of the court's order. The court came down heavily on the hospital and granted the following relief to the complainant. The complainant was granted compensation of 25 lakhs for the pain and suffering, loss of reputation, emotional distress, and financial loss for 18 months for no fault on her part, resulting in deprivation of her right to live with dignity. Additionally, payment of EPF and other monetary dues. All of this was part of what the court held should be paid by the organization. The compensation was required to be paid to the complainant within 8 weeks, failing which the same would attract an interest rate of 9% per annum. So this clearly, I think it's probably one of the orders in our country which have sort of where the amount is fairly substantial. It's 25 lakhs, not a small amount. It is to compensate also the complainant for the loss of wages because she was out of a job for a while on account of the retaliation that the organization did by terminating her employment. The hospital was further directed to pay a penalty of 50,000 due to the non-existence of the internal committee. So that's the first violation of the POSH law for the organization. And hopefully Medanta is taking this very seriously now, because the POSH law also has other types of compliances that every organization must follow, must comply with. So this is the first strike, if you will, and the organization should now take this very seriously, that every aspect of the POSH law must be complied with. So this was what the Madhya Pradesh High Court of the Indore bench held in this particular case. So what's the takeaway for all of us? Key takeaways are the High Court reiterated the importance of setting up an IC as per the provisions of the POSH Act. Yeah, so that's key takeaway number one. Key takeaway number two, the High Court awarded compensation of 25 lakhs to the complainant, right? So that's, again, that's no amount to be sneezed at. That's a fairly substantial amount. And it really sort of sends a very strong message, a very strong signal to corporate India that compliance with the POSH law is now being taken very seriously by the courts. So you take a risk with non-compliance at your own peril, and that's the kind of penalty that one is likely to face. The softer aspect of non-compliance is basically not only leads to reputational loss, but may also lead to compensatory amounts. So compensation we've already discussed. The interesting thing here is that very often organizations don't take into account the immense loss to the brand and reputation of the organization when cases like this come out, right? It shows an organization that does not care too much for complying with the law, irrespective of whether it's the POSH law or any other law, right? Non-compliance with the law of the land is viewed very seriously by both governments and by particularly by the judiciary. So it's very, very important that every organization takes compliance a lot more seriously than they do today. For some reason, a lot of corporates feel that the POSH law is not something that requires a high degree of compliance. We don't know what that is, what's the thinking behind that. But if you're complying with labor law legislations, if you're complying with tax legislations, you should definitely be taking the POSH law very, very, very seriously. It's a part of the labor law compliance, and it is something that every organization should take very, very seriously. So these are all the key takeaways from the Medanta case. I just want to reiterate, please ensure if you are guiding and advising your management, please ensure that they're aware of the brand and reputational risks non-compliance with the POSH law can lead them to, right? It's very, very important. So I'll leave that thought with all of you before we move on to the third and the last case. I hope, I'm just going to take a quick look at the chat to see if everybody is able to hear me clearly. So I think, okay, I think it's okay. It looks like we don't have any challenges on that front. All right, so I'm moving on to the last and final case, which is popularly known as the IP infusion software case. Now, first up, I want to put a caveat out there, which is that this case has not been reported in any of the sort of reporters that we rely on for our cases. These have come out of public, press reports, articles published in the media, and so on and so forth. Despite our best efforts, we were not able to get our hands on this particular order. So if any of you have a copy of this order, I'd be most grateful if you could send us, a copy of the order. You can email that to us at Rainmaker, info@rainmaker.co.in. We tried our best, our team tried our best, but we were not able to pull out a copy of this order. So if any of you have it, please do send it over to us. So yes, so our analysis is purely based on whatever has been shared in the public domain. So to that extent, if you find that if there are any discrepancies, if you have a copy of the original order, please do share with us. We are happy to, we will stand corrected to that extent. But to the best of our knowledge, these are the facts of the case. So have a look. The complainant was a former employee of a software company, IP Infusion Software Private Limited. She was allegedly subjected to sexual harassment by a senior manager, HR, while Mr. Bharat Chandrasekhar, while working for the company. The complainant alleged that the respondent had commented on her nail paint and had tried to touch her fingers inappropriately. She had also alleged that the respondent had commented on another job applicant, saying that he would be interested in hiring her since she was good looking, which essentially amounted to creation of a hostile work environment. Both of those aspects, the physical contact as well as the comments. The complainant filed a complaint before the internal committee of the company, which was quashed. The complainant challenged the decision of the IC by filing an appeal before the Labour Department, essentially the appellate authority under the POSH law, which is the Labour Commissioner's Office, right? So here's what the Labour Commissioner's Office held in this particular case. The Additional Labour Commissioner, T. Srinivas, directed the company to hold back the respondent's annual salary increment and other benefits for 3 years, and further directed the company to deduct rupees 50,000 from the respondent's salary for 60 months and pay the same to the complainant, right? So the provision in the POSH law which pertains to compensation was used to full effect by the appellate authority in this particular instance. And compensation was asked to be paid to the complainant. The appellate authority further directed that in a scenario where the respondent leaves the company, so if the respondent quits IP Infusion and IP Infusion is unable to acquire the compensatory amount from him, so if he puts in his papers and decides to quit and say, okay, I'm out of here, I'm leaving, and IP Infusion cannot hold back that entire amount, IP Infusion would be then required to pay that entire amount. So it's a very, very interesting order where the compensation has to be paid by the respondent. But in the event of the respondent quitting the organization, then IP Infusion, the organization, would then have to make good the compensation to the complainant. The Additional Labour Commissioner also held the company guilty of creating a hostile work environment that was conducive for sexual harassment and therefore was in clear violation of the POSH Act and directed them to pay rupees 4,80,000 to the complainant towards her monthly salary between September 2015 to December 2016. So essentially, the complainant was also had to be compensated by the company. So there are two levels of compensation that are operating here as per the order of the appellate authority. One is that the respondent had to pay a compensation of 50,000 rupees per month every month for the next 5 years. So that's a total of 60 months. Secondly, the company was also guilty of creating a hostile work environment, which basically meant that the company was also asked to provide a compensation, to the complainant. In our in these kind of cases, the company could have typically got out, or a mitigating circumstance for an organization could have been to say that, look, we have conducted awareness campaigns, we have conducted awareness sessions, we have trained our employees, we have trained the managers on what appropriate behavior at the workplaces. All of that would be critical aspects that could have been viewed as a mitigating circumstance or a mitigating factor by a higher court. We don't know whether the company had done all of that or whether they have made those averments or in their pleadings. But all we can say is that this is basically what the appellate authority held in this particular case. And to the best of our knowledge, there's been no appeal from this case because we haven't found any documents that show that IP Infusion or either party for that matter has actually filed an appeal. And I think the period for filing an appeal is 3 months from the date of the order. So it looks like this order will stand because there has been no appeal by either party in this particular case. So key takeaways: the POSH Act has given the power to determine the compensation to be awarded to the complainant, right? So this power has been given to the IC, LC, appellate bodies, courts. They can award compensation to the complainant if sexual harassment is established. Since mental and physical factors need to be taken into account for determination of the compensatory amount, the IC, LC, and appellate authorities have high degree of discretion in arriving at the compensation. So here's the other thing that all of you must bear in mind. It's very, very rare to find a situation where compensation that has been awarded by the IC has been overturned by a higher court, IC or even an appellate body for that matter. The IC's ruling is viewed as that of being a civil court, right? And therefore, or a trial court in that sense, and therefore, appellate courts are very, very reluctant to interfere with that to that extent. So mostly ICs, here's a word of caution for ICs, or a thought really. When you're arriving at the compensation in the course of, after guilt has been established, guilt of sexual harassment has been established, one has to be very careful and think it through. What are the factors that I must take into account before I pass an order providing compensation to the complainant, right? So that's a very important factor. Most ICs don't give that due importance. It is something that we stress a lot upon in our trainings and our workshops, that determination of the exact quantum of compensation is both science and is part science and part art. So one needs to be very careful when one is awarding an order compensating the complainant. So these are the key takeaways to be borne in mind. Again, we reiterate the need to all organizations to sensitize your workforce. Please ensure that your workforce is sensitized. They understand what sexual harassment at the workplace is. They understand what creation of a hostile work environment is, because ultimately a corporate is run by individuals. So the senior management of an organization need to understand that these are the factors that amount to creation of a hostile work environment. And creation of a hostile work environment is frowned upon by most courts. In many interesting judicial decisions, you'll find that courts now have very little or no tolerance for creation of a hostile work environment. So retaliating against an employee who has complained, terminating their employment, firing them, all of these are demoting them, are making it very difficult for them to continue to work in that organization. These are all seen as creation of a hostile work environment and viewed very, very sort of, how do I put it? In a very, very poor light by the courts of India. So please bear that in mind if you're in a position where you're advising the senior management of your organization. So that brings us to an end of today's session. Happy to take questions. Remember, we will keep watching this space. We will have another session on judicial decisions part 2, where we'll cover 3 more cases. So do watch the space and join us for that. We haven't yet fixed a date for that. Otherwise, I would have shared a date with you today. But I will come back to that shortly. I'm going to quickly take questions, if any, and then we can sort of move. Navneet Kaur, sir, please send the PDF in email. Navneet, are you referring to the cases? Yeah, sure. Let me see if we can push out the PDFs of all the cases to those who have attended this session. I'll check with my team, and if that's possible, we'll do that for you. An anonymous attendee is asking, can you please discuss the evidentiary thresholds that the applicant had to meet in order for the court to order such substantial damages? Which case, I'm not sure which case you're referring to, because we discussed 3 cases today. If you can tell me that, I can respond to your question. Anonymous attendee, whom to appeal? CEO? No, the appeal is not to the CEO. As per the POSH law, the appeal lies with the appellate authority. So the internal committee is level 1, that's your trial court. The second is the appellate authority, as you saw in the 3rd case, which is the Labour Commissioner's office. Aditi is asking, are there any cases to be referred to for false complaints, and how does the courts deals with that? There are very few cases with respect to false complaints. We know of cases that have been handled at the level of the IC, but how many cases have gone to higher courts on appeal? Very few. That said, Aditi, we'll do a little more research, and if we can find a case that has gone to a higher court with respect to a false complaint, we'll try and incorporate that in our judicial decisions part 2, the next session that we'll come back to you with. So I'm going to quickly go through these questions here. How was it SH in case if Medanta? It was harassment but had no sexual connotation. I think Rakhi has already responded to Meenal, so I'm not going to go into that. But yes, it was definitely, when you have Meenal, do have a look at the full case. We'll share that with you. It definitely amounted to sexual harassment at the workplace. Then, trying to see if there are any other cases. Kishore D, I need to know your opinion. I sent a query through email. I need to know your opinion. Kishore, we'll look at your email and respond accordingly. I'm not sure which email ID you send it to. Please send it to info@rainmaker.co.in. That's the ID you should send it to, and we'll respond to you. Debjani, hi Debjani, how are you? It would be really helpful to get a PPT for the session. Debjani, we don't distribute the PPTs, but here's what we do. We distribute the video of this particular session. So you'll get the full video, which is as good as getting the PPT. So we'll share the video with you at the end of the session. Our team will send out maybe a couple of days later. We'll put together the video and share that with you. Anukriti is asking, is material punishment becoming more common now, monetary compensation? Actually, Anukriti, it is becoming more common. But here's the thing that most organizations are not aware of, which is that the POSH law makes it mandatory to award compensation as per section 17 of the POSH law. However, most organizations either are unaware of it, or they believe that they've taken an alternate interpretation that it's not mandatory. Rainmaker's view, our view, is that monetary compensation is mandated as per POSH law. So if you're sitting on an IC, please ensure that if the respondent is found guilty of sexual harassment, monetary compensation is awarded in accordance with the guidelines in section 15 and 17. Anju Bagai, sir, is POSH law applicable to LGBT? Yes, it's a more complicated question, and we have another session that we are having with Mr. Suresh Ramdas. We'll have a more deeper discussion on that aspect of the POSH law. We can rely on IPC cases for false complaints. Well, I'm not sure, Jyoti Bhatt, if what the question is. Would you like us to bring out IPC cases? I couldn't follow. Clipsy Banji is asking the quantum of compensation. Hi, Clipsy, how are you? Good to see you here. The quantum of compensation in IP infusion can definitely scare the best intents of corporates. Yes, the quantum of compensation is high. I wouldn't use the word scare, Clipsy. I would say that it is a message that all corporates need to take very seriously. Not just corporates, individuals in organizations. So even the individual in that case had to pay a very high fine. 50,000 for 5 years is no small amount, no matter how senior you are. And of course, corporates need to be very, very aware of the fact that the POSH law is being enforced very seriously. And they have to take it seriously, and they have to ensure that they are not putting the organization in a position where strictures are passed against the organization for non-compliance with the law. So yes, if to that extent, yes, there is some element of fear that is there. Neeru Sharma, hi Neeru. Anthony, will you be covering any false allegation case in the next webinar? So Neeru, we are I have responded to this, but we are still in the process of finalizing the cases. So also there are very, very few cases on false complaints that have gone to a higher court. Nevertheless, our team will research on this and see if we can cover at least one case of a false allegation in the next webinar. Santosh is asking, any SH case happened through virtual environment which can be taken up as a case study? That's very interesting, Santosh. Actually, we are seeing lots of cases happening in the virtual environment. Our Rainmakers panel of experts, external members who sit on multiple internal committees, are seeing a lot of cases. The objective behind our webinar series is actually not to cover those IC cases, but to cover sort of cases that are in the public domain. Nevertheless, it's a good suggestion. I'll take it back, discuss with our team, and see if this is something that we can cover as well. It's an interesting suggestion. Thank you. So then Clipsy is asking, they may try all means to avoid this kind of an inquiry. Yes, that's possible. Swati Saini, hi Swati, how are you? Are there any guidelines on how the IC should determine the amount of compensation? Yes, Swati, there are. The law provides a lot of guidelines. So what we try to do is we take the guidelines that are there in the POSH Act, and we have created a framework that organizations can use, internal committees can use, sort of simplifying the entire process of how compensation has to be determined. So we have created some sort of a grid for that, which we use in our trainings and workshops. But yeah, there are very clear guidelines on this. Tanvi Rastogi, is there a session in the pipeline for POSH policy changes, additions during the current work from home scenario? Tanvi, no, not really. It's a good point though. I think it would be interesting. That said, a lot of the, we had, I think we had previously covered a session on how to create a POSH policy. It was covered in one of our sessions. But it's a good point. Maybe we can do a short session on that as well. Thanks for bringing it up. We are though having sessions on what we are in the future going to cover what the work from home scenario is. We've covered it in small parts in some of our prior webinars, but we will be covering it in more detail as we go along as well. So maybe we can take your comment in for that webinar should we conduct one. Sneha Dalvi is asking, many corporates including male employees under the POSH policies, many corporates include male, my apologies, many corporates include male employees under POSH policies. Can the legality of this be challenged by anyone? Sneha, very good question. Depending on how that POSH policy is drafted, it can be challenged. So having a gender neutral policy per se is not against the law, but if it is not drafted in an appropriate manner, it can cause the organization to run afoul of the POSH law. So therefore, I would say that we are happy to support you in case you require assistance in drafting a gender-neutral policy that is consistent with the POSH law. So it's a nuanced activity. It needs to be done very carefully. Sheila Mistry is asking, I missed your webinar on understanding the LGBTQ plus community. Is it possible for you to share a recorded version? Yes, absolutely, Sheila. We will share a recorded version. I'm not sure at this point in time whether we're going to share the entire webinar or what we are calling a highlights package, which is about 15-20 minutes. But we'll come back to you shortly on that. But there is definitely going to be something that we're going to share with all of you. I can tell you that personally, it was one of the webinars that that I hold very close to my heart, and we have 2 more webinars coming up with Mr. Suresh Ramdas. So if you missed the first one, do make it a point to attend webinars 2 and 3. I can assure you that it'll be time well spent. Aditi is asking, for all the sessions you've already conducted, is there some place website where we can get the reference material, presentations, videos, etc.? Yes, Aditi, all of it is available. It's all available on our website. Just go to our website, rainmaker.co.in, and there is a tab called webinars. So click on webinars. You will find we have arranged it by webinars on POSH law, webinars on different aspects, leadership, etc., etc. So it's all neatly organized. Just go to the Rainmaker website, www.rainmaker.co.in, and you will find it under the tab webinars. Praseed Kumar, hi Praseed, how are you? Good to see you here as well. Please add me in the catch-ups as well. I wasn't part of those discussions. Sure, we'll do that. Clipsy, thanks Anthony and team. You always add value to the understanding around POSH. Thank you, Clipsy. It's always good to see regular names and faces. You've become a part of our webinar session, so delighted to always have you here. Please do keep joining our webinar series and enriching it with your questions and comments, because that's what makes a webinar useful, productive, successful. The attendees really, and the questions that all of you ask. So thank you, Clipsy. Thank you, Rasmeet. Thank you very much. Neha Jain is asking, case where appointment of external member of IC was raised in question by complainant. Is there a case where appointment of external member of IC was raised in question by the complainant? Yeah, I think Neha Jain, the Air France case was one such case where the appointment of the external member was raised by the complainant. So yeah, that's, if you're looking for that kind of a case, that's the case that you should look at. Okay, so I think we're all out of questions. I'm seeing a little more in the Q&A space, so let me see if I can quickly address those because we are almost out of time. Oh yes, we are. I'm going to try and see if I can take. Can you repeat? Anonymous attendees asking if we can repeat the takeaways from the first Air France case. I can't do that on this session, but please watch out for our recording. We will be sharing a recording of this webinar with you. So please spend some time on that. You can scroll up and back. It will be a YouTube video, so you can watch it when it comes up. I think, Aditi, your question on false complaints we have already addressed. Kishore's question also addressed. Janish is saying the explanation of cases seemed a bit inadequate and superficial due to less time allocated per case. Fair enough, Janish. We'd like to have spent more time. Maybe there are a number of ways in which we can do it. Either we can spend 30 to 40 minutes on one case and deep dive into it, or we can spend 45 minutes on 3 cases and spend a little bit of time to leave the key takeaways, because the audience is largely, I think, are people who want to have an understanding of the law and not necessarily a deep dive into the law. But it's a fair point. We'll take that into consideration. Anukriti, is material compensation? Anukriti, I think we already covered that question. An anonymous attendee is asking, is POSH applicable to colleges too? Yes, very much. In fact, I think in our next webinar, we will cover one case which pertains to colleges as well, and what the court held in that particular instance. So we'll have one case coming up for you there. An anonymous attendee is asking, the POSH law wouldn't be gender neutral, right? As there is no scope for appeal to courts. Sure, there are other ways organizations can avoid SH, but not specifically under POSH law. So the POSH law is, the POSH law as it stands today is not gender neutral. And therefore, if a man is sexually harassed, he would have to take a complaint to the committee within the organization that can hear it. But the appeal from there would not lie with any courts. It would be as per the process mandated within the organization. So that's correct. Kishore, you've sent it to info@rainmaker. We will deal with it. We will take care of it. Sumali is asking, besides complainant and respondent appealing to the appellate authority, who else can bring non-compliance to the notice of higher courts? In a particular, in an instance, really the locus is with the either party, whoever is the affected party in that particular case. But if there is as employees who have vested interest in a company that's not complying with the POSH law, they could probably try and maybe intercede in a case that's being heard and say that this is happening in our instance. It's not simple. It's not going to be easy to bring it to the notice of the higher courts, but one can definitely inform the government about it. So you can inform the WCD Ministry, the Women of Child and Development Ministry. You can inform the NCW. You can inform the state government. You can inform the Labor Department. These are all people that you can bring non-compliance of the POSH law to the notice of, and they would be required to take action under that. Sanjay is asking, thank you for this very informative session. Quick one. Is the appellate authority common for all states? No, it's not common for all states. It's a good question. Each state has a designated appellate authority, which is the labor commissioner in that particular area. So it's not even within the state, there will be multiple appellate authorities. So it's not the same for all states. Anonymous attendee is asking, when will we be having the LGBTQ related session? We'll try and cover this with respect to the one that we have had, the session that we're going to host, have with Mr. Suresh Ramdas, which is purely focused on the LGBTQ community. Kishore, have any cases taken place during the lockdown? Yes, Kishore, unfortunately, lots of cases have taken place during the lockdown. It's unfortunate, but it's true. And you're going to probably see, right now, all the cases are being heard by internal committees and local committees, but you're likely to see some of these cases may be going on appeal in the coming months. So only time will tell us what kind of cases have been heard during the lockdown. Somali, section 17 is about penalty for publication. How is it about compensation? Sorry, I may have misquoted the section, Somali. I think it's 15 or 17. Let me come back to you on that. I was under the impression it's 17, but I stand corrected. If it's not 17, it may be 15. 15.3, I think it is. Tanvi Rastogi, is there a session in pipeline for POSH policy changes? Tanvi, I've already answered your question. Somali, I said 15. Yeah, so that's the one. So I think I've covered all the questions that you've all asked. Again, I'm sorry we could not make the session longer or maybe spend more time per case. But really the objective of this session is to give you all an overview of the law and how the courts are interpreting it. The key takeaways are meant for you to ponder over. If you have the time, do look at the cases. We will push out the PDFs of the first two cases to you. We don't have the third one, as we already mentioned. Do have a look, spend some time, go through the cases, and then if you have any further questions, you can bring it up when we either write to us at info@rainmaker.co.in, or you can bring it up when we have our next, the second webinar. The dates will be announced very shortly for you. So thank you all once again. Thank you for your time. I hope you found this session useful, and I look forward to meeting all of you soon again. Thank you. Have a nice day.